Hey everyone. Hey, welcome. We've got people coming from all over the country here, everyone. So it's a really good, really good show out today. We might kick into it. Everyone, we're going to kick off. Um, we'll probably kick off with Darren and I just talking. Here's Ant now, and we'll kick off in a moment. Just let a few more people come in. So everyone, welcome. Like, so good to have you on today on such an important topic, safety
That's good.
and positive safety and enterprise excellence. It's going to be a chat in all round. And I know we got a few, we got Dargs on from BHP and a few other people. Is that Ian? Is that Ian on from Ian BHP too? I don't. Apologies if I'm off mark with that, but I think it's going to be a good topic today. Everyone just talking about positive safety, and I know the team at Sentis have done a lot of work here. And I think the thing that's really of interest today is talking about the blend of excellence and safety into enterprise excellence, and it's going to be a really good topic. I guess it's such at the heart of respect for people, isn't it? We've got just Anthony Gibbs and Darren Kennedy from Sentis on the line. I think Susan's been tied up, so I think we're going to kick through and share and talk and work through together. So I might hand over to Anthony and Darren just for an intro, guys, because rather than me do the intro on yourselves, the one bit I'll just say is that I've worked with centres for a while and just the most amazing culture of respect themselves and also execution. So for those practitioners in lean, agile, whatever it might be there, Sentis is a really good example of a company who has a very good cadence of execution and a great culture of respect. So I'll hand over to Anthony and Darren.
Thanks, Brad. Darren, did you want to kick us off, mate?
Yeah, sure.
Hi,
Thanks.
mate.
Yeah, no, all good. Good morning. And yeah, thanks for having us on, Brad. Really appreciate it. Nice to meet you all online. I'm Darren Kennedy. I've been with Sentis for about 13 years. Had the pleasure of seeing the business evolve over that time, and most recently over the last year or so with the positive safety evolution of how we deliver. So I'm the COO at Sentis, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Darren. So everyone, we're talking today on positive safety, and Anthony's just finished writing a book. There's also been a lot of work done that we're going to talk a bit today about Hay Point and the work done there to integrate positive safety into the excellence journey. But Andy, mate, I'll hand over to you on this, mate, and just to intro yourself too. But just keen to know, mate, too, just lean into this piece of why positive safety. And community, please feel free to jump on with any questions as we go along too. Just raise your hand or online or jump on. But and intro, mate, and then why positive safety? Because I know this is an evolution for you guys. You've been sort of setting the scene in safety for a long time.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And I'm not sure whether my camera's working. I've had a few tech issues this morning. I'm sitting in darkness if you can see me at the moment, but somehow my internet's still going, but we'll push forward. I've been at Sentis for about 17 years, and Sentis is about a 22-year-old company. And the way that we came to be was to service the mining industry in a space that hadn't been previously targeted. So we a lot of mining organizations originally, and then this extended out to agriculture and utilities and manufacturing and processing. They identified that they'd invested a lot of time and money and energy into systems and physical controls and the environment, but they were still struggling to, I guess, break past the plateau of performance. And they identified that potentially the missing link there was people and people's mindsets, their attitudes, their belief systems, and then how they approach things. So a bunch of psychologists like myself got together, and we've come up with a whole bunch of tools and programs and approaches that support leaders to lead positive safety and operational outcomes, but also programs that support mindset shifts at a workforce level.
And Ant, where did the piece on positive safety come from? Because I know, you know, there's an evolution of the journey there, and you've got the recent book on positive safety. What is this evolution, and what's playing out there in that regard?
Yeah, so I guess where safety has evolved from is that safety predominantly in industry is about the absence of harm. It's about we're successful in safety if nothing bad happens. Where what we're promoting instead is that maybe that isn't safety. Just because an incident doesn't occur doesn't necessarily mean that something has happened safely. So therefore, we're looking at flipping the dial here to look at, well, as opposed to searching for the absence of harm, how do we look for the presence of safety? I guess an example of this, Brad, would be, let's imagine we were going on holidays up to Cairns, and we're prepping for that drive. It's about a 20-hour drive probably from Brisbane to Cairns. What would you do to prep for that drive?
Well, I'd be thinking about the stops. I'd be thinking about the things I need in the car. I'd be thinking about how to keep the kids sane through the drive. I'd be really just trying to plan it out to the nth degree to make it actually work well, and also think about the car environment with the kids in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you plan your trip, you'd think about your own fatigue levels, you'd make sure you've got lots of coffee or whatever you have available. You might stop somewhere midway point. You'd make sure that you got good rest the night before. You'd probably go out and make sure that your car was well serviced, your tires were pumped up, everything was in good condition. Now, let's imagine you do the opposite of that. You don't prep, you just rock up, you just wing it all the way there. Is there a chance you're going to get there safely?
There's a chance, but there's also a chance that if I don't plan my stops and I just push through, that I start nodding off and all sorts of things play out.
It could be. The likelihood is you probably will wing it and you probably will get there. And the challenge that you've got is you wing it, you get there, and what does your brain tell you? Well, that's safe. Well, I got there safely. Yeah, we'll often talk about that language. We arrived somewhere safely, but actually, have we arrived there safely, or have we actually probably got we've got there. We haven't had an incident, but have we actually arrived there safely? Now, the challenge with not approaching that trip in the way that you described is that we're increasing our likelihood for, I guess, unpredictable, uncontrolled energies to come into play. And as a result, our likelihood of having an incident is much more increased. So the challenge that we often find within workforces is a job gets done, we look at the outcome as opposed to the inputs. And if the outcome is one with no perceived incident, the assumption is that is safe. What we're proposing here is that is not a predictable way to run an organization. That's not a predictable way to run safety. Now, what also amplifies this particular issue is that sometimes the things that we do to complete a job might actually make it quicker, might actually mean that it gets done quicker or takes less materials or whatever the case may be. So in an organizational context, if we're just looking at the outcome of no incidents, well, we might actually reward someone for getting a job done without incident, but the job might not have actually been done safely in the first place. So what we're proposing in this particular book is that actually we need to completely flip the dial and flip the framing around how we view safety, how we measure safety, and how we report on safety, so that we are looking at that presence of positives as opposed to the absence of negatives.
It's a great way to put it, and I can really see it. Team, what questions come into your mind? Like, I know my mind's just, really buzzing thinking about what Anthony's talking about there, where it's about, I guess that road example to Cairns is such a good one. What questions or thoughts are coming to your mind? Who's got a question there on this topic that we've just spoken about? Yeah, I can hear someone come off. What have we got? What have we got, guys? What questions around this piece of we just can be focused on getting the output, we get the output, no one gets hurt, it's thumbs up, let's do it again. But really, it's positively looking at the elements to get that output, and then really planning it and doing it the right way. And is that where the positive bit comes in? Is that we're actually positively looking at that system of getting the cans, and we're doing it in a positive way to really plan it and prove it, or have I got that wrong?
No, no. Well, look, it's that, and it's also digging under, I guess, the hood a little bit further and looking at, well, what is the type and quality of motivation that we're providing people with around safety? So again, a lot of the motivation that we place around safety is, well, we don't want you to get hurt. And if you do the wrong thing around safety, there may be a potential consequence attached to you, either personally or professionally or whatever the case may be. Now, what that means is that in a lot of organizations, the drivers around safety are quite external to the person. So, and that's what we would call junk food motivation. External motivations to get things done are junk food. They're short, sharp sugar hits, but they require a lot of inputs to keep the energy and keep the momentum up. So we're looking at flipping the dial here so that we can look at internal drivers and internally driven motivation to complete things. Now, one of the key elements that we've been able to identify with the sort of 80 odd organizations that we've done climate survey results with, and 60 odd thousand respondents, is that organizations that are able to move from that junk food motivation to that more, I guess, nourishing, internally driven motivation, is that they've actually redefined safety, either overtly or subconsciously in the way they approach things. These organizations tend to understand that actually safety is more than just about making sure that people go home physically safe. It's also about making sure that the conditions are set up around a particular person that enable them to feel psychologically safe and have strong social connections with their leaders. And in fact, huge correlations can be found in our data between the quality or the perceived quality of safety leadership, people's physical safety choices, and their sense of psychological and social safety. So, what we're really looking at here is actually forming a different type of relationship around safety, from one where safety is policed and discipline is orientated and blame is allocated, where towards a more collaborative approach to safety. Where people feel like they can speak up, they can raise issues, they can talk to particular challenges, they can have input and consultation into the way they complete their job on a daily basis. So often the shifting point is for organizations is to actually, for the leadership team initially, to actually reframe, well, actually safety isn't just about physical safety, it's also about psychological and mental health and social connections within the workplace as well. So we actually have a model that we break down with organizations that shows that concept of the positive safety experience within businesses.
I love it, and I get from that conversation too, mate, where we're talking about Hay Point with Susan too, where you've the boss journey that's happening, which is all about creating autonomy and engagement and collaboration at the front line, and up 80,000 problem solvers, where everyone in BHP is a problem solver. And then in Hay Point, you've then brought in positive safety to bolt into that. Am I correct on that path, mate? Do you mind just explaining?
Yeah, look, I mean, Sandy and Linda and the team at Hay Point are probably the most recent example of this. We've also done this sort of work at Incitec Pivot with the Safety Partners program and across a number of organizations. And I guess what I'm finding with some of these leaders who are implementing these systems and thinking outside the box a little bit is they're saying, well, actually, we've got the systems, the processes, the BOS system is pretty well implemented and ingrained across BHP, but they're not always getting the bite that they want. They're not always getting people sort of tie into the system and contribute to the system in the way that's required. So what the team at Hay Point is, they identified that the orange behaviors at the bottom of that BOS pyramid, for anyone who's familiar with that, they're very people-centric behaviors. They're the empower principles. So the idea of this program was, well, how do we actually target the people component of that system in such a way that creates a strong tie and a why and a what's in it for me? So the idea with this particular program was to actually take some of the Sentis principles from positive safety, interlink them with the empower principles from the BOS program, and actually tell a cohesive story about the way that safety and operational excellence and productivity and positive business outcomes can actually complement one another, and create overall better outcomes.
That's brilliant. I might hand over to Dargs on this for a second. Dargs, do you mind just sharing the boss pyramid and just talk to that, mate? Because it might be good. Because talk about the different layers and that empower bit too. Because Dargs is part of the BHP boss team, but I thought it might be good if you got a second, mate.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you, Doug.
Yeah, sorry, I was having problems with my mic, as usual. I'm always having problems with my mic. Really there's 4 dimensions in the BOS system: connect, discover, deliver, and enable. And what I like to say to people is really around certainly our leaders is the fundamental roles of leaders is the top and the bottom part. So how do you connect with your people to enable them discover improvement opportunities around safety, so they can deliver sustainable results? But the biggest challenge we're seeing is that misconnection between what a leader's role should be is really to connect with their front line to enable them discover how to improvement opportunities. Because what I see is we see leaders so wrapped up in just metricated systems of we have to do X number of field leaderships per month, or we have to identify X number of hazards. And what generally happens is systems drive behaviors, right? So the systems of hazard identification drives hazard identification. So you actually have behaviors of people actually going around and creating hazards just to fulfill a metric at the end of the day, rather than the ideal behavior of how do we actually go out every single day with the mindset of how do I make my job safer, easier, better, faster, cheaper, in that order. And it's really how do we get the leaders to create systems around that mindset. So how do you get them really going out every single morning? They're doing their jobs at pre-starts, because when you go to pre-starts, you see them. It's like, did we have a safe day yesterday? Yes, we did. Yeah. Did you have all the tools? Yes, we did. They navigate their way through poor processes every single day, because we've got good people. And most organizations, 95% of people are good people, right? Based on the Deming's principles. So we navigate our way through poor processes. So I try to coach the leaders here is how do you actually get them to think of every single day going out to do their jobs, instead of the reactive, what we did yesterday, is look forward and go, right, this job I'm doing today, how am I going to make it safer? Just even if it's just by 1%, and then come back to the crew the next day and celebrate that 1%. And then you, Brad, go out the next day and you try and find 1%. If you can get every single crew member over a week, that's 7% improvement on safety every single week. But again, we're not thinking that way. Our leaders are not thinking that way because they're so focused on hitting the metrics or tons out the door, productivity gains.
Yeah.
So I could talk all day on this. I'll take up all your 45 minutes on this particular subject.
I know, Doug. Thanks for contributing. I thought it's just great having your contribution. And it's like you said, mate, and like Ant, you said, we're trying to get the cans. We just want to get the cans. We're using the carrot or stick to keep people safe versus actually like Stephen Dargs just said, it's like we're leaning into the positive safety element of engaging people and involving people and planning with people, which, Ant, I want to pose something to you, mate, that's been a challenge in my brain the last few days, right? I've been listening to Edgar Shine on culture, and like Edgar brings an interesting angle because he brings this angle that you could have an autocracy, total dominance, or your culture's your culture. And so in my brain, I'm going, can you make a total command and control autocracy great? And with what we're talking about with positive safety, I'm thinking the answer is probably no. Because if you're not engaging people and involving people and you're just command and control, you're going to try to, people are going to be driving the cans like crazy and there will be crashes. What's your thoughts on that, Anne? Because we're really talking about autonomy and engaging people in this, just like Dargs has mentioned also.
Yeah, look, I think one of the really thoughtful and I think quite impressive things that they've focused on heavily at Hay Point is about how do we include people at all levels of the organization in implementing this particular system and this particular program. So, and then how do we sustain it moving forward? So when we originally commenced this piece of work, we identified, we did a 1-day Teams program and a couple of days worth of a leaders program on top of that, focusing on particular skill building, capability building around this. But one of the major things that they did as a business is they actually put the call out and they said, hey, we're looking for people who are passionate about safety, passionate about improvement, and passionate about making a positive difference to support us in this particular program. And they put the call out and a bunch of people put their names up. Hands up, and they end up calling these people enablers. Now, these enablers received additional skill development around safety, mindset, culture development, and they were responsible for deploying the training and the subsequent activities across the organization in partnership with Sentis. So as an example, I might be up there talking about the concepts. I'd throw to one of the guys from Hay Point there, and they'd talk about, well, in my job every day as a fitter, this is how this applies to me, and this is how I apply these principles, and this is how I apply these concepts. Now, that was sort of phase 1, is getting that co-facilitation piece in. Phase 2 was empowering those enablers to go out in the field and have conversations, to call process, to say, hey, team, we need to think about this in a different way. And they're continuing to invest in those enablers. As things go on, they now deploy things called toolkits, so that they want to keep giving people nudges around some of these key concepts. So they continue to invest in these enablers to go out into the field and provide nudges to the rest of the workforce. And they're getting towards the point where there's about 10%, there's the goal, 10% of the workforce will be enablers. So these are people that have been given additional skills and capability to be peer-on-peer coaches around operationalizing the mindset shift that we're trying to operationalize across Hay Point. And Brad, the process has been incredibly rewarding from a safety perspective, but the individual stories that people are taking away from the program are probably the thing that is actually making more of an impact. A lot of what we talk about in the sessions is basically giving people the tools to take control of their thinking on a day-to-day basis, to identify what sort of unhelpful thoughts look like and look at what more helpful thoughts look like. And there's one lady out there, and she's told this story a bunch of times, so I'm sure she won't mind me sharing. Tar, she talks about a story where she was in a traumatic car accident when she was a teenager, and swore that she'd never drive a vehicle. Through the process of going through the program, she underwent a reframing process where now at nearly 40, she's just got her license at the first time. Now, that doesn't necessarily tie directly back to safety, but what it does tie back to is people taking control of their thinking, identifying thoughts that are holding them back, and putting in new processes of thinking that help them to achieve their goals. So like across the organization, we're getting these stories pop up where people are applying these concepts at home and at work and in safety, and we're sharing those stories, and it's starting to build a really positive momentum across the site.
Oh, that's awesome. Because I guess when it comes down to it, it's about our belief and our mindset that's going to ultimately drive what plays out, isn't it? In the way it goes. And what's been some of the outcomes apart from that that's been achieved? Like, and how would you go about this type of journey? Like, what would you recommend to people?
Look, I think, some great safety outcomes, and are continuing to work on that. And there was a big focus on their most recent large shut that they had, and making sure that was completed safety. So we put all contractors through a process and made sure that we had good in-field coaching and support happening for those folks. We're also in the process at the moment of reviewing the BMA Safe tool and looking at how we can empower people to use that tool in a way that's most effective to keep people personally safe. So it's an ongoing process. And I guess this is the thing about culture, Brad, is if you don't design and invest in your culture, to come back to your kind of earlier question, you're going to get whatever culture you want. And it's possibly not going to be the culture. Oh, sorry, you're going to get whatever culture you get, and it might not be the culture that you want. So thinking deliberately about what's the type of place that we want to work in? What's our vision? And working backwards from there is really, really crucial if we want to actually shift the dial in relation to culture. So now what the team at Hay Point identified is that they wanted to be safe. They saw their responsibility as not only creating a safe workplace within the site, but Linda takes very seriously the influence that Hay Point plays in the broader community. So she is invested in training not only her entire workforce, but actually giving those skills and tools to any contractors that come on site, any of those sorts of people, because her belief system is that, well, actually our influence spreads well beyond the site. It spreads in the community. We give these people the tools in the community. They'll think better. They'll own things better. But also it's about playing it forward. She often talks about playing it forward. Yep. That contractor might come on our site and they might only be on there for 2 months. We might not see them again, but they might jump onto another BMA site, or they might pop up somewhere else again. And that little investment that we've made can have a ripple effect that creates that positive change, not only across the site, but across, I guess, the industry more broadly. So it's quite an inspiring vision. And as a result of that, that team continues to invest regularly in building the capability of their people and their workforce. So yeah, I guess sitting down, coming up with a vision, identifying what your gaps are and the areas of improvement to focus on, and then going from there will be great. They also completed their auditing process, I think, for BOS. So is it EOI, Brad, or OEI? I can't remember the exact acronym.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, some huge shifts in that auditing process with the program, and people feel like attributing the shifts to that ability to have that conversation, feel collaborated with, feel consulted with. So yeah, Brad, I think a lot of it is about investing in, all right, what are we trying to achieve? What's the type of business we want to be, and planning for the long haul. Now, the long haul doesn't necessarily look like working with a consultant like us for that entire period. Certainly one of the things that Hay Point identified is that they use us for certain things, but they wanted the ability to be able to drive and lead this internally. So now where the process is at is those enablers that we've trained up, they're the ones who are training contractors when they come on site. They're the ones who are on site influencing and rolling out toolkits. They're the ones who are providing a feedback loop into senior management to say, hey, this is the vibe on the floor. These are some of the challenges and issues that we need to address. So we're starting to get that really positive feedback loop happening on site, which enables that continuous improvement around culture.
I love it. So you've got those that you've got the house or pyramid of BOS, and at the bottom is empower our people that Doug spoke about. And I guess, and I can really see that this approach of positive safety, where we're talking about things like vision, mindset, leading culture, defining and leading culture, and engaging everyone in it, it actually leans straight into that empower our people position on the BHP operating system. But I guess in a company, any company, it creates psychological safety, it creates engagement, it creates people, I guess, and I'm right in saying that it engages people's hearts and minds. So then people are actually thinking about safety and feeling safety every day. Whereas the old command and control, extrinsic, the stick and carrot type of thing, it doesn't fully engage the mind.
Yeah, 100%. So look, I mean, part of it's about the workforce going, all right, well, what's my 50% or what's my contribution to these outcomes, and what can I do different to create a positive outcome? But it's really also about leaders thinking in that way. And Darbs, who jumped on before, I think shared this, when leaders go on site, what are they thinking about? Are they thinking about, well, how do I tick this KPI off so that I hit my numbers and I can get on to the next thing? Or are they thinking, well, I've got this time in the field. This is an opportunity for me to make a meaningful connection with my people. And it is a real shift in mindset from viewing safety as a cost to something that costs time, money, effort, and energy, to something that is an investment or a currency. So, it's about having those leaders go, well, I'm in field, I'm on site. This is an awesome opportunity.
I think we might have a connection problem there with Ant at the moment. Team, while Ant comes back on, what questions or even contributions have you got, team, around where you've been able to use safety positively to actually engage and empower people or shift leadership mindsets? Ant's back on too now. And what questions do you have here? Either a story where in your organization you've really been able to lean into this positive safety position and use it to empower or engage, or a question. What do we got? And don't be shy, everyone. There must be something going through your mind.
I can throw something in here.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I got Trevor. I got James and Trevor. Trevor, I'll come back to you in a second. I'll go to James quickly.
Yeah, I guess a bit lucky. We're fortunate to have a session with Sentis. So we had Steph from Sentis come down to a session with us. It's absolutely amazing. If anybody wants to is thinking about doing a session with Sentis, I highly recommend it. It's really, 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 really good. Yeah, I just want to touch on the ideas of like the intrinsic motivators. One of the things that really stood out was kind of like the 5 reasons why you come to work. The big 5, right? Yeah, and it was you have people write down the things that means most to them, and it ends up being nothing to do with work. It's family, hobby, etc., and it's shifting people's focus to that reason. So it's like that, looking forward to what their intrinsic motivators are, what motivates them to go home safe, and it really shifts that focus of safety that way. And it worked really, really well.
That's good, James. Awesome. Thanks, mate.
Thanks,
and Trevor, over to yourself.
Yeah, thanks, James, as well. Anthony, the one thing that I'm interested in is that generally the shop floor does care about safety. The shop identify hazards, comply with standards. Generally, the shop floor is quite into it, and generally senior management coming on site, the executives are, we're all behind it, we all stand for safety, but it's poor old middle management in the middle who's stuck in the whirlpool, smashed day to day, and typically safety falls down when the actions identified through your hazards aren't done. How do you go around empowering those middle managers to move with speed and purpose and get the stuff done?
Look, it's an interesting flag, Trevor, because the middle managers or the frontline leaders, depending on the business you come from, often cop the focus of any safety underperformance. They're sort of caught in the middle. Look, if they're not enabled to get done what they need to get done, I think my encouragement for senior leadership teams is, instead of looking down initially, is to look in the mirror and look at and ask themselves the question of, well, what's our contribution to this particular outcome? We're rolling out a piece of work at the moment with a large mining services company who, despite our challenge, decided they were going to roll out at the front line first, because that's where the big problem was, and then cascade the program up. And program after program, people are going in and going, well, yeah, cool, we really want to do this stuff. It's not that we're not committed, but we can't get it done because, if I raise this particular issue to my manager, I'm not listened to, I'm not heard, I don't have the psychological safety to speak up. I'm just told to fix the problem, and they don't want to hear it. So I think if you've got an issue at the front line, it is worth thinking at your frontline or your middle management. It is worth looking at, are we setting those people up for success? And the best way to understand, are we setting them up for success and what can we do to set them up for success, is to actually talk to them. They'll tell you, as you're probably aware, Trevor. So I think that is part of the issue, is making sure that we're setting those middle managers up for success.
Right. Then what other questions have you got? What else is going through your mind here? One thing I'm thinking on this, and I might hand over to you again, Doug, is just like, Doug, do you mind just describing some of the elements of the BOS system that also helps the middle management, I guess, at least catch, see, not forget about issues that are raised up, and sort of just an insight onto how that's done?
I think the issue that I see, Brad, is raising issues up the line because that's not the culture that we're trying to create. The culture we're trying to create is 90,000 people solving problems every day, everywhere, everybody. Um, so it's really, I'm trying to educate the leaders is no, how do you empower and enable your people solve problems at the point of identification? How do you give them the tools and equipment and the mindsets and behaviors and support to actually go out and do their jobs, but also improve the way they work every single day? Because what we see is when you pass problems up the line, it goes into the ether of lists of continuous improvement ideas that the front line have come up with, and the manager or the supervisor ends up getting bogged down. And that's why our supervisors are so bogged down spinning plates, because they've got all this work to do. Instead, back to David Marquet turning the ship around, intent leadership is pushing decision making to the lowest level, closest to the customer. So how do you get your front line solving problems? And if you can get in the BHP context, the 90,000 problem solvers doing 1% improvement every day, 5-6 years time, it's going to be an amazing organization. And that's not just BHP; it's every organization. And that typically, and I think Ant mentioned the OEI, the Operational Excellence Index. That's how we measure. That's how we measure maturity and continuous improvement. And when you get to a level of, it's scored at a 0 to 100, and it's benchmarked against global companies worldwide. But when you get to about 65 on that scale of maturity, which is you're touching the 75th percentile of global operations, effective operations, you actually see an inverted org chart symbolically. So you no longer see the management at the top. You see the leaders at the bottom serving their people, doing what they should be doing, coaching, developing, mentoring, and strategizing. And the front line are the people that are running the business. And it's not until you get to that stage, and there's a lot of hard work to get there. It takes years to get there. Some do it in 5 years, some do it in 10. But when you get there, it's a beautiful place to be. And there's high levels of respect, and Ant will probably back this up. Where you see high levels of respect in all levels of the organization, you will see low safety issues or incidents. Because genuinely people are caring about how each other work in a work environment. People are safe to speak up. They're safe to call out issues. Psychological safety is high. And generally it's culturally it's a great place to be. And that's why if you go to the likes of the South American countries, they would have a higher rate of safety improvements and safety hazard and actions of their field leaderships than any other country worldwide, because they have cultural nuances. Australians tend to be a lot harder to shift, so that's why it takes a bit longer. But generally speaking, leaders, when you get that high levels of safety and respect, you start to get that level of high safety control.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thanks, Doug. Thanks, mate. And what would be your advice, mate, on companies wanting to use positive safety to start creating more of that respect and power and engagement that Doug shared and that you've been talking about, mate? What would be your sort of starting point to talk to there?
Look, I think to speak to Doug's point, yeah, agree. If you can get people making decisions at the front line and making good positive choices at the front line, and you start to get the inverted pyramid, excellent outcomes. One of the challenges we often face, particularly early in this process, is leaders, I guess, intellectually buy into that particular idea and concept, but emotionally it's a shift. Because a lot of people who are in leadership roles, particularly technical kind of leadership roles, got there because they're really good at solving problems. They get there because they're technically capable, technically sound, and they get a kick out of that. A lot of leaders, when issues come up to them, they get an absolute kick out of solving that problem. And it feels important. It feels high status. It feels like you're in control of things. So it's a deliberate mindset shift and like a stop for yourself in those moments to break that habit. That leader being able to go, all right, well, if I solve this problem for this person, am I empowering them to solve it next time around? So you've kind of got this intellectual versus emotional pull for leaders that unless you call it out for them and you make them self-aware of how their decisions and how their choices impact on others, people just don't get it naturally. And you will revert back to type over time if you're not setting up systems and processes to give people nudges along the process. So I guess spending the time with leaders, not only giving them the behaviors and the results that we're looking for, but digging in under the hood and helping them understand what makes them tick, what makes other people tick, and their sphere of influence is a really important part of creating these positive shifts.
That's awesome. Thanks, Ant. Appreciate it. And Ash has got a question here.
Yeah.
What would be examples of the lead measures, or I guess leading behavioral measures, that can be implemented when looking to changing to a presence of safety culture or a positive safety culture? What are some of the things that you've seen people really start to focus on, Ant?
Cultural maturity and perceptions of leadership is a strong key indicator. We look at underreporting rates. We often measure that when we go into organizations. So what percentage of incidents get underreported? We talk to the workforce about how often they feel production is prioritized over safety. We look at closeout of it, and then there's your sort of routine stuff, closeout of hazards and quality of pre-starts and in-field interactions. We tend to also be really encouraging organizations to shift away from a lost time injury frequency rate and instead look at a high potential frequency rate. So, what we want to be doing is we want to be making sure we're getting as much data as we can and then focusing on the right data. So, focusing on high potential events, not necessarily, always high outcome events, but going and going, all right, if not for fate, luck, or chance, could something way worse have happened? And then doing deep dives into that particular information, and then ensuring that we're doing verifications that high potential events are being managed. So critical control verifications as part of in-field interactions and pre-start meetings becomes a really important part of that process. So they're the sorts of things that we'd typically be looking at, Brad, is really spending less time on low consequence, low potential stuff, looking at the high potential stuff, and then looking at making sure that we've managed what we can in that space.
Yeah, I love it, Ant, because I see the number of hazards become a very common lead measure in a lot of organizations, but there's a negative consequence of that in that maintenance departments end up overburdened with low consequence, low risk work. Everyone ends up overcooked with that, and we're not actually dealing with the high consequence risk. And then also too, are we actually shifting culture? Because we can end up, I've seen maintenance departments and whole teams just totally snowed down and destroyed through masses of hazards. But I guess what you're saying, mate, is there's some really mature lead measures you actually just mentioned there. I'm going to be listening back over that bit, mate.
Yeah,
that was a gold statement there, Ian.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of them listed in the book here, Brad. An organisation we worked with recently who moved to focusing on high potential frequency rate as opposed to LTI rates. The trickle-down effect of that was into their incident investigations, their critical control verifications, and then 6 months later, what we actually found was trust and reporting from the workforce went up. And the reason being is that people understood that safety incident investigations aren't a witch hunt. They were problem-solving activities aimed at continuous improvement and creating positive shifts. So those little systemic things can have huge cultural trickle effects and create that positive feedback loop.
Great. Mate, Jim, I might let you, are you able to come off mute, Jim, and just ask your question directly, mate? Or would you rather I could talk it through?
I'm trying to work out to say. One thing in my experience is the glue that ties a lot of this together is actually capturing, as a consequence of solving problems and resolving hazards, an image of safe, standardized work, the SOP. So how figural in the model of BHP is that? Because obviously we could identify hazards or unsafe acts, etc. But if that doesn't resolve in capturing the current next best, safest method and something leaders can hold people accountable to follow, it's kind of a bit sporadic. Does SOP form a big part of the model that Sentis approaches their work by?
Yeah, look, our job is to look at other SOPs brain friendly and people friendly, and then if they are so, how do we wrap the science and the psychology around that to help people understand how that works. The BMA Safe Review we're doing at the moment, Jim, slightly different, but similar sort of thing. So that's a personal risk assessment tool, like you take 5, whatever the case may be. It's been identified by a number of BMA sites that could be being used better, more broadly. Now, there's 2 ways we can approach that, right? We can sit down as a safety team or an executive team and make a bunch of decisions and then cascade that down. But that's probably going to get limited buy-in. So what they've actually done is they've engaged, I think they engaged about 25% of their workforce from the floor all the way up. And we've got a bunch of feedback, what's great about the thing, what's not great about the thing, how can we make it better? And we've got that feedback, we've consolidated it, we've let them know what we've heard. The next step in the process is we're selecting co-pilots, which are going to be people who are going to support us in the further deployment of the program. They're going to help us redesign the tool, the system that sits around the tool, and the peer-on-peer coaching process. So shifting safety from something that's done to me to something that's done with me. And that's probably a lot of the same sort of stuff with the SOPs. If an SOP isn't working, Jim, a lot of the focus is, why don't these people just follow the SOP? It's the safest way to do work. What if it's not the safest way to do work? What if there's things in the SOP which actually don't make a lot of sense? So I guess that consultation loop is a crucial part of this. And again, that's a mindset shift for leaders to be curious and go, well, this isn't working. I wonder why. Let's go ask. And that curiosity drives a lot of that focus.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
I might just, I know I'm picking on you, Doug, but with it, like, I've seen some good BHP sites and Hay Point that Ant's worked with and others where the frontline do own the process improvement. There's rapid cycles through standard work that they actually, are constantly finding the best way of improving. Do you mind just sharing a little bit on that, mate, directly from BHP?
Just back on the SOPs. I mean, one of the key principles of Shingo is seeking perfection, and it's the one principle that I did manage to get to a Shingo Prize application in a previous world, and I didn't get the Shingo Prize because of that one principle. So it's very passionate to my own heart. It's one of the greatest failures I cherish most is seeking perfection. But what the mindset of seeking perfection is all about is, we often create an SOP, we communicate it, and we expect people to follow it, and we put it into a knowledge management system with a cool search engine and yada yada yada. We only ever take it out when there's a defect or there's an error. The mindset of seeking perfection in the BHP operating system world, it's pursue operating perfection, is how do we create the mindset of continually looking to improve that SOP every single day. So it's almost like have every single stop that we have. And when we design an SOP, we also design the aspirational state of what that SOP could look like. Now, that could take years to get there. It could be automation. It could be whatever it is in there. But unless we have that view of their aspirational state of that SOP, and then you create the roadmap to get there, right? So, that could, as I said, that could take you 10, 15 years with the amount of SOPs that are in the business. I went to a startup meeting, a level 1 frontline meeting with a supervisor there last week in Newman operations, and I have to say it was probably the best routine I have ever seen in my entire career. And the reason why I say that was there was 2 frontline colleagues that literally jumped in and said, well, I did my task today, and I took out they call it a win, work instruction. And I actually went and made a slight improvement to the way we operate that particular machine today. And the other person beside him said, well, I was doing this other task, and I went out and I did an improvement to that. And I was like, I've been trying to get these frontline people and supervisors thinking this way for the last 2 years, and this frontline team just came up with it themselves. And to me, that's the essence of the BHP operating system. It's the essence of a good safety culture. It's the essence of the whole, what we're all trying to do is how do you get your frontline continue look to challenge the standard? Because the standard is only a guide, right? It's only there to keep the job, to do the job, keep the job safe. But how do you actually challenge the standard to make it, as I said earlier, safer, easier, better, faster, cheaper?
Thanks, Doug. It's awesome. I guess there's this common theme coming up today around empowering, engaging, particularly that front line, and to create that positive safety, that positive improvement, that positive culture. And I can hear that other common theme of really our leadership belief, I think, Ant, is what you're saying, and leadership behavior, or what we think and how we behave plays such a major part in this. Now, everyone, we've got 10 minutes to go. What burning questions are in your mind thinking about your own organisation, or what do you have to share around this topic? Because, I've got a million questions, but I want to give you all a chance to ask Ant or Doug the question while we're here, because this is a very important topic. Mate, please, Cole, and you guys are doing a great job there. I was hoping you'd ask a question.
Yeah, look,
Cole.
and I guess the challenge I've faced with safety is the legislation, the legal aspects, the lawyers, and how does this, because I'm a real believer in culture and behaviours and driving safe decision making, because I think that's where you are really tackling safety at the front line and the coalface, because a lot of known hazards you can manage, but it's the unknown hazards that people need to make a decision or have a thought process about how you go about do that. But you get that part of me, and then there's the other part of you where you're trying to create evidence, you're trying to create records, and you can get so sucked into that, particularly if you've only got limited resources. So I guess and then you've got the board of directors who are only looking at a particular metric to measure safety, but trying to convince them about becoming more focused on that cultural and safety behaviour, because that's really going to be the long term. So I guess my question is how have you dealt with those challenges, or have you had those challenges when you're implementing a program like that?
Yeah, good question, Cole. I'll start with your board first. That's a pretty common challenge that, they've been brought up on something like a lost time injury frequency rate, and that's kind of how they perceive that you measure safety. And I think there's probably a fairly big educational piece that needs to be done with a lot of boards to help them understand that actually, again, that absence of a lost time injury frequency rate doesn't necessarily mean that you're fulfilling your duties to ensure that you're getting people home safely. So that education piece to say, well, just because the LTIFR rate is low doesn't mean that we're safe. So, if you want to create a shift at that level, you need to give them something else.
Yep.
To measure safety on. So again, what we're often encouraging organizations to do is, you can keep that number, that's cool, let's talk about it, but let's talk about high potential events, because the high potential events are the ones that can seriously harm or kill people. They're the things that can have the biggest personal consequences for people on the board. Let's look at measuring and tracking those and ensuring that we've got adequate controls in place to support those. Now, if you can get that across the line, and there's some great books, Paper Safe is a great one that talks about this, and there's a few other bits and pieces, and we've got some papers on our website, Cole, that can support you with that. That does then start to shift the focus that, hey, well, safety, again, we need to be looking at how we can verify safety within the workplace. That's where we can start to look at critical controls and observations and those kind of more lead indicator cultural kind of measures. At an individual workforce level, a big part of the challenge that we're facing when it comes to safety is the way that we've set up and designed safety systems actually has disempowered people. We've told them, rock up to work, leave your brain at the gate, and follow the SOP. And an SOP is great if everything is predictable and as planned. If The process, like if we follow that process and there's no variance in the system and everything's cool, you know, the SOP will work most of the time. Oh, assuming the SOP is up to date. So look, a lot of the shift is saying, well, actually, what's in safety for you is getting home to the things and people and things that matter most to you. So again, shifting from that external to internal motivation, and then empowering them to understand how the tools we give people help them to make safer choices. So again, if I complete a risk assessment mindlessly, tick and flick, it's doing nothing for safety. But if I read the questions and have a conversation with my colleague, I'm better able to see the hazards and I'm better able to manage those hazards. So that big educational piece of the why, the what's in it for me, and the how becomes that focus at the front line typically. And you know, we've seen some awesome. We had Allspec on the call before. You know, BHP, a whole range of organisations. People are hungry for knowledge about what makes them tick. So you give them those tools, and people just latch on to them, and they apply them really nicely. Have
Awesome. Great.
I answered your full question there, Cole? I'm not sure.
No, very good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I know one thing I'm going to be doing, mate, is getting a copy of Positive Safety and having a read, because I've gained some brilliant insights here today. We've also just had Mark put through the question, mate. Where can people get hold of Positive Safety? And, mate, how can people reach out to engage with more questions or even help from Sentis, mate?
Yeah, so you can get the book off Amazon. It's available on Amazon. It'll be out in Audible probably in about 2 or 3 weeks. It's cheaper off our website though. So anyone who's published a book knows you can control your price on your website, but not on Amazon. So you can go to our website, sentis.com.au. You can just buy it straight off the website there, and you'll get a cheaper rate for it. There is a positive safety community attached to the book where we've got over 700 members there that get together and talk about how the concepts and principles can be applied within their organization. So if you are keen to dig further into this, you can jump on the website, grab the book there, or alternatively, hit me on LinkedIn. It's Anthony Gibbs on LinkedIn. Love to hear from you and love to jump on a conversation.
Brilliant. Well, and also, Doug, thanks for the contribution off the cuff too, mate. And everyone else on your contribution, thanks for helping us here. And this is truly a topic to create a better future, because it's so people-centric and there's so many multiple wins out of it. Yeah, of course, the biggest is just safety, people going home the way they came to work, but so much more we've spoken about today. So, and team, thank you so much, mate. Thanks for everything. And
thanks, Brad. Appreciate the opportunity.
Cheers all. Hope you gained some good value. Talk soon, everyone. Bye for now.